speaker. I can't wait to hear what she has to say. She's new to Austin. Her bio is relatively small. Her name is Suzie Jimenez. You're going to have to explain how to pronounce your last name.
It's Jimenez, like an H.
It is Jimenez. Okay.
Yes.
So Suzie Jimenez, thank you, Suzie. She is a senior talent acquisition partner. She's going to be talking about marketing your job search. So getting the word out to companies, who you are, what your value is a very tough thing for some people. So we cannot wait to get her sage advice. She has over 20 years of technical recruiting experience with recent DEI programming experience. She started her career in the LA area, working with entertainment industry leaders like Disney, Universal Music Group, NBC, Warner Brothers, Nickelodeon, and Fox. She moved with her family to the Austin area in July of 2014 and recently landed at Cloudflare. Yay, one of our best companies. So a warm welcome to Suzie Jimenez.
Thank you. Yes, can you hear me okay? I didn't do an AV sound check earlier. Fine. Okay, great. Thank you for having me, everyone. Yes, and you know what? Austin is actually a place that I did not target. I was listening to my husband, and we had friends that kept telling us, you have to come to San Antonio. It's such a great life. And so I took a trip out there. I admittedly was not in love with San Antonio, but then I started doing some research, about the Austin area. And because of my background, it just was so appealing to me because of the tech industry. And all it took was for me to ask on, LinkedIn, hey, is anybody hiring for a technical recruiter? And before you know it, I was out here interviewing. I got here on Sunday, interviewed Monday and Wednesday, and by Friday I had an offer. So all to say that sometimes you do have to take a chance and a risk. Just a little bit background on me, marketing, job search, and branding yourself. That's really what it's all about. And it really just starts with believing in yourself. I'm the daughter of an immigrant. My first language was Spanish. I had a lot of disadvantages. When I started school, there was no books in my home. I didn't have anybody to help me with homework, and actually was kind of dysfunctional. We had immigrants coming in and out of our home, family coming in from Mexico, and, their mentality was just graduate school and get a job. Yet here I am, fast forward, 20 some plus years later, I had a mentor in high school who kind of reached out to me, and I started taking these computer or Mac courses in 7th grade because that's what appealed to me and that's what I like to do. I did receive a lot of praise because of my programming skills, yet math wasn't, my biggest, area in which I wanted to really engulf myself in. But you know what? I had to leave my home. I had to go out and move out and pay for my own apartment and put myself through college. And so all to say that I took a risk. If you haven't already, that's kind of like the theme of my life is you take a risk. And I answered an ad in the newspaper. Anybody from Latin heritage knows La Opinión is a Spanish newspaper in Los Angeles that was looking for a receptionist that spoke Spanish. And I'm like, that's me. I can speak Spanish, I can translate. And because of the computer classes that I took, when I took on that job, all of a sudden I became an asset. And those two partners ended up opening up other businesses and took me along with them. So I kept continuing to go to college and taking all these courses, and they had a son that was about my age. And all of a sudden the internet in 1999 became like the biggest thing. And so we opened up a first of its kind. It was called easycashnow.com. And so I became marketing, I became HR, I became IT. I consumed it all and learned it all and went to college and started this startup with this family. And all to say that it wasn't a traditional path for me. It's not like I went to college, I graduated, and that's what I wanted to do. It was more about, hey, what can I learn? What can I do? Nothing is below me. I just want to learn. And so that's part of marketing and branding yourself, is believing in yourself, raising your hand, doing the tough work, doing the meat. I didn't want to work at a junkyard. I didn't want to be translating, but yet I had a need. I needed money and I needed a job and I needed to go to college. So all to say that, you have to have a change in your mindset. It's not just traditional, here's my resume, here's what I've done. These are the list of duties that I have. So you really have to change your mindset in that you need to market yourself. And in order for you to do that, you have to believe and really discover who you really are and what do you enjoy doing. Imposter syndrome is real. And so this is not a imposter syndrome type of, presentation, but I need you to know that it does happen. Do you think that I didn't? I absolutely struggled with that. I didn't have a college education when I finished this startup. All I had was this experience, but in my mind, who's going to hire me? I didn't finish college. I quit, but yet I didn't rely on all the experience that I already had, or I didn't market that. So I kept going back to what I thought I qualified for, a receptionist, an administrative assistant. Never did I think that I should be applying for HR jobs or operation jobs or finance or marketing, because in my mind, I didn't have the education. So all to say that I held myself back. My imposter syndrome held me back from launching and moving in my career in the way that I wanted to. And so what happens is you start getting resentful with yourself because you didn't push yourself or you didn't take that risk. Statistically, and I know there's a lot of male and female here, but statistically, a woman will not apply for a job because she doesn't feel qualified for it even before she applies. So we tend to opt ourselves out. And so it becomes this vicious cycle of, not having the confidence. And because of the confidence, your behaviors change. And the action is you don't apply. You kind of like listen to your negative self in your mind. And yet, what are the results? You end up kind of going back falling into the same type of job that I didn't want to be answering phones and translating, for the rest of my life. I wanted to do something different. So, and then there's the other side of the coin too. My official title at the startup was Director of Operations. And so when I left the startup, I started applying for director level roles. And of course, I wasn't getting any callbacks and I wasn't getting any interviews because, I had 2 years of startup experience as a director with no education. That's what I kept telling myself. So I kind of had to, how am I going to brand myself? What is it about this job that I love to do? Did I hire people? Yes. Was I involved in the technology of hiring people? Did I hire, our IT people? Did I, what was and so that's when I discovered myself, is that the part that I loved the most was the hiring. And so I thought, what, I should really start branding myself as a recruiter, because that's really what I want to do. Although it wasn't my full-time job, it was the part of the job that I really enjoyed. And so when you start discovering what you really like and where you are comfortable, you start branding yourself and you start believing in yourself. You start asking yourself, like, what is it that I want to do? And so that's how I got started. And so when you look at my LinkedIn profile, you're going to see my full name. You're going to see my picture. You're going to see my pronouns. And something that I want to touch on pronouns really quickly as you brand and market yourself is it's okay to use the she, her, hers, because having a diverse background was helpful to me. And so recruiters do go out and look for these skill sets, and these pronouns, to be able to include more women. Since the women are not applying for the jobs, the recruiters are going out and looking for the women to include in the interview process. And then males, how this helps with your pronouns, it shows that you have an inclusive mind, and everything is about diversity and inclusion and equity, which is awesome because I love it. And back when I started in tech, it wasn't anything that we talked about because it was kind of this little hidden thing where you don't hire because we're not smart enough, and we're whatever. You guys know the story, but all to say that it shows inclusivity. It shows empathy. And it's okay to have feelings and use these words. Show your pronouns, your title, your interests, the kind of things that you want to talk about. And this is how you start networking. The first question people ask me is, well, how do I get my foot in the door? How do I, get people to notice me? Start talking about it. Start connecting with people. Comment on blogs, comment on comments, comment on somebody else's comment. And before you know it, you start getting connected with people who are like-minded. So, do your research. There's a summary area where you can talk about yourself. There's an activity. Recruiters will look at the activity to see where are your interests. I don't know if you knew that, but LinkedIn has an area where on a public profile is we can go in and see the type of comments that you're making, who are you connected with, what are your interests outside of what you're telling us. And that's how you grow your network. You connect with like-minded people and you start. And so when I first started, I didn't have a LinkedIn. So you know what I did? I picked up the yellow pages and I started calling people. I'm starting the startup. I need some advice. Is anybody willing to help me? I got a lot of no's, but I got a lot of yeses too. And so I used the paper version of LinkedIn and I started making connections and I started building my own network because remember, I didn't have a college education or anybody to go to. I had to figure it out on my own. And so back then the internet was just starting to take off and the search engine was AOL and then Yahoo came. And so there was just a little bit more of information that I was able to get. So all to say is you do have to grow your network, ask the right questions, but it starts with trying to figure out, what is it that you want to do? And here's some resume tips that most people will not tell you. And I'm sure you've probably attended a lot of, resume tips, but your email address dates you. There is ageism out there. So I want to tell you, use an email address. Are you still using one from the 90s or are you, use a Gmail or use an Outlook? Again, inclusive. It's you're not dating yourself. You're staying on top of the latest and greatest technology because those are the things that we look for. Even though you may not be looking for a technical job, the technology is moving along and the businesses are following. Especially now with COVID, we were all like, "Hey, we got to go to work. Now we got to go paperless. Now we got to, use technology to do our jobs every single day." So, and the length of your resume matters. There used to be this concept of, it has to fit on one page. It does not have to fit on one page. It could be multiple pages. I'll tell you where that one pager came from. It was back when you had to either mail in your resume and you had to use expensive paper or walk in and have that expensive linen paper. So let's just try to fit it all in one paper because I have all these resumes that I need to send out, or fax in your resume. And so, multiple faxes come in, what happens? They all fall on the floor and people have to put them together. So the concept was put everything on one page so that, people there's no back. So it has to fit on one page. But now that, we're using PDF or using Word and Docs and all of this, you can add as many keywords and accomplishment and details. Your resume could be up to 3 pages long if you wanted to, because it's going to be attached to an email and it's not going to get lost anywhere. But remove your hobbies. Nobody cares. Honestly, I've been a recruiter for 20 years. I don't ever read that stuff. And nobody really wants to know what you do on your free time. This is a great point of conversation, not for somebody to read, on a resume. And you're leaving yourself open to bias as well. What if somebody doesn't like the things that you do? Like, I don't want to work with that person because I don't relate to them outside of work. And remove your address. Don't put your address on there. Security is everything these days. Just put in the city, state, and zip code that you're in with your mobile number. And remove any soft skills. Everybody oversell. This is not marketing. Putting in your soft skills is not marketing. Soft skills are what you're going to demonstrate during the interview process. Your communication. Everybody says they have good communication. Everybody says they're organized. Like, you can list all these things on your resume. Honestly, we don't ever look at that. And then removes your dates of graduation. I don't care when you graduated. I really don't. I want to know what it is that you've done, your accomplishments. I want to know your story. And so that's kind of where that marketing yourself piece comes in, is tell me the story of your resume. Don't just list like, you know, for example, I'll use, you know, when I was at the startup, director of operations, you know, easycashnow.com. You know, I started, and to say that first person, I started this company with blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I helped from the ground up. I was able to build, you know, from, and just tell the story, not just Outlook proficient, Excel, Word, good communicator. You know, I already know all that, or if not, you wouldn't be applying for the job. I want to know the story behind your job. And then gaps are okay. People try to, like, you know, one too many resumes where I've caught people in lies because they try to, like, you know, smush these dates, or, you know, they feel nervous about there being a gap. It's okay to have a gap. Life happens. And I would rather have somebody tell me, hey, I took some time off to take care of myself, or I took some time off to take care of somebody else, or, hey, I worked myself so hard that I needed a mental break. That's what happened to me. I worked from 1992 until the year 2001 at a startup with no vacation. I did not take a vacation. I took 1 to 2 days off, probably in that span, and guess what happened? I burned myself out. I was no good to anybody anymore. I started to get moody and resentful, and just because I didn't have a mental break. You know, were they the best times of my employment towards the end? Probably not. It probably was not. I needed to disconnect and self-care, and I didn't do any of that. So all to say that the last days at my startup, the last couple of months weren't that great. I ended up having a fallout with somebody because I was just short and sick of it, and, you know, didn't appreciate what I had at the time. And, you know, you learn from your mistakes. And then just be authentic, be yourself, be empathetic. It's okay. Like, we want to hear, personalize yourself during the interview process. We want to know who you are, not just what you can do. A lot of the times we will hire somebody based on who you are as a person, not just can you do the job. You know, most people can do the basic jobs, but it's really getting to know you as a person. And don't be afraid to share your feelings or share how you feel about something. I think that's probably the silver lining when it comes to COVID, is that we've all been invited to each other's homes. I'm at home now. My husband's at home. My kids are at home. Everybody at work knows that I have kids and that I have dogs running around, and that I use Amazon more than I probably should because my doorbell is always ringing. But, you know, I'm not afraid that somebody's going to judge my life because I have one. So again, personalize, market yourself, discover who you are, what you want to do, and have that shine on your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So that's all I have for you. I'm open to any questions that anybody has. Shannon, back to you, or whoever's hosting.
Here, there obviously there's a lot of controversy about some of those resume things, and people
Sure.
are putting in the chat. I went to this webinar and I was told this, and this webinar I was told that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people that you will always have different opinions about all of this stuff, because there is no definitive style
That's
guide
right.
that exists, that all resumes need to go back this far and they all need to have this kind of format. I think your advice is very good. A lot of what you're talking about has been echoed in different ways by different speakers that we've had. Certainly the email address. We've had lots of recruiters say that when they get AOL or Hotmail emails, they just throw those resumes away because they know those people are old. One person said Gmail is getting to the point where it's old as well. Somebody else pointed out that me.com is probably okay because it's the Apple version, but yeah, I think Gmail and Outlook are certainly fine. I've never heard anybody weigh in on the att.net or, you know, Southwestern Bell, you know, those phone company things.
Yeah,
Exactly.
don't. No.
But I'm happy to see that you don't say that it has to be one page. We still get that sometimes from recruiters who say, you know, I'm so busy, I don't have time. But when a resume goes through the applicant tracking system, the ATS doesn't care how long it is.
No.
And
it's
so,
keywords. It's keywords. That's why it's important that you find out what you want to do and you apply for the jobs that match the keyword from the job description onto your resume. Use the same verbiage.
And there are all kinds of good, easy ways to do that. And I've heard that there's a huge movement against soft skills where it doesn't help to put them on a resume because just talk about your hard skills. That's what gets you hired. And then, as you said, communicate your soft skills when you tell your star stories in the interview.
Yeah, the only soft skill that I would include is if you are bilingual. People do use that, and that's becoming very, very common. So I would include bilingual.
I always look on that as practically a hard skill, just because it's so crucial. The telling the story on your resume, I would like you to expand on that a little bit, because it sounded as though the example you gave is really prose. And so it sounds almost as though it's a, like, would you still talk about it in resume language where you would say, number 3 person hired, you know, like bullet forms, not like prose, but in bullet form where you say you created the system for the HR department from the ground up, that sort of thing?
Yeah, the way that I would tell the story, or I'll share, because I just joined Cloudflare 3 months ago. And so I was on a job search. So in the last 3 months. So what I did with my resume is Force Point. Half of the world does not know what Force Point is. It's not like McDonald's or Red Bull where people know what it is. So put a description of the company that you worked for and what they do. And it gives you a little bit more insight into the type of company that you were in. So that's part of the story. The next part of the story is the accomplishments. Where did you start and where did you end in the summary itself? You know, I came in as a senior recruiter 3 months into my job. You know, I was promoted into a senior manager global, and this is how I started my global experience. And then list, you know, your accomplishments and where you've done. So it's still the same format. It's just adding a little bit more summary. And yes, a lot of recruiters will tell you, I don't have time to read. Well, you know, that's not true. You know, we will. It's not true. We do skim them, you know, we're fast readers, but if we see the information, so this is where that comes from. If I'm looking at a resume that says Force Point, global manager, it doesn't really tell me anything. I don't want to go and ask you. So that's why we're just going to move on to the next one. But if you add a quick summary of where you were, what company, well, what is Force? Oh, cybersecurity. Oh, they're cybersecurity, they're tech. Okay, well, what is she? Oh, she moved really quickly. Okay, let's talk to this person. That's the thought behind we don't read it. It's not that we don't have time to read them, is that we're not reading, you're not giving us the information we need to move you on in the process. You're not telling us the story. You're not marketing and branding yourself. So does that make sense?
Yes. Now, do you know?
Yes.
Do you know what it was about your resume that made Cloudflare want to talk to you?
Yes. So instead of listing soft skills, I told my story. And if anybody wants to see my resume, I'll be more than happy to send it out as an example. I got several comments through the interview process. When I got to the head of HR, she comes from Twitter. The first thing she told me is, I am so glad to see that you wrote a summary because it tells me about you. outside of your resume. I made it very personal. I made it very empathetic to who I am, the struggles that I had, and where I came from. And so because I didn't just list who I was as from a business perspective, I also wrote who I was as a person and what my strong suits are. So
I'm sure we would love to see that resume. It
Yeah.
sounds as though it's unique. And yeah, we would love to see it. Shannon had already said that she was going to ask you for your slides. And she usually posts, the speaker slides on our newsletters so people can see them. And especially since yours were a little bit small. But if you could also send that resume, you can cover up any information you don't want to make public, but
sure.
that would be helpful to see that. It sounds really
Well,
unique.
it's all on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is my resume. They both have, and that's another tip. Your LinkedIn resume, it's not just your LinkedIn profile is your resume. Half of the time we go onto your LinkedIn profile. I'd rather look at your LinkedIn profile than to look at your resume. So
Right. So lots of people feel that the resume just talks about your professional history and achievement, and that LinkedIn talks about who you are as a person.
Reverse the role. Reverse it. That's what got me the job at Cloudflare. Reverse it.
Combine the two.
You will stand out.
Interesting. All right. Anybody else have questions? Everybody, let's see. Oh, here's one. How would you suggest to represent multiple positions over a professional growth period? And I think what this may mean is positions that are, Elisa, correct me if I'm wrong on this, where it's not a linear progression, but you've gone maybe even different industries, different careers, where it's not it's kind of a weird path. It doesn't go directly, to point B.
Well, that's part of it, but focusing on looking back at the last 10 years or 15 years is what we're hearing in these resume, classes. I've been with this past company for almost 10 years, and I was promoted into different positions over the progression of time, starting out at the bottom. So how would you, I shouldn't go back more than 15 years. And and how would you represent the multiple positions that I was promoted into as I progressed in my roles there?
Yep. So in my staffing days, I corrected a lot of resumes like that. So let's suppose you work for ABC company from the year, 2000 until 2010. Put that at the top, 2000, 2010, and then just break it down by title. And in parentheses, put the dates that you held that title. Or you don't even have to add the dates. Just you've been for the company for 10 years, and these are all the titles that I've held and the success stories. That's how you would list it. Too many dates, too many dates, kind of like, oh, you got to kind of keep up with it. But this is where I worked, this chunk of time, and these are the titles that I held with the most recent one first.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Does not fit in a conventional rubric. This person says, I'm a multi-passionate entrepreneur. I have forged my own path that does not fit in a conventional rubric. How do I use a resume, I guess, to find some type of paid work using my LinkedIn profile when I have other ongoing interests?
You can put that in a resume. Just because you own the business, it's still work. It was paid. And even volunteer work, add it to your resume as well. That's another thing that, I probably should have added on here. If you've done some volunteer work, list it. It's important. There's a lot of things that you've done. You can list out. I've worked with many contractors, and all you do is just list I'll stop sharing so I can see everybody's face here. But you can list you can list what you've done for how long and the story behind it. I founded, I created, I built, all the things that you did when you were doing that project. So, and just list them down. It's okay. You can still list it as a resume.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Mhm.
Regarding the comment from the group member a moment ago, should we not go back over 15 years in our resume? Do you have a rule about that?
Yeah, don't. 10 to 15 years is enough. What matters is the last 5 years, if I'm honest.
Now, if you're telling your story, so
Mhm.
in your summary, since you've got such stellar recent background, did you talk about your beginnings in your summary of your resume?
I did. I included it.
Okay.
Mhm.
But then you didn't go back to that in
On
your
my resume,
chronology,
yes.
in your work experience.
Yes, these are talking points. Remember, once you get to the interview process, you're still marketing, you're still branding, and you're still telling your story.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Well, Kathy, I remember in one of your classes about resumes, you said to fold the paper in half, and the first top half of that resume, first page, is what they're going to look at the most. And now that Suzie just said last 5 years, to be honest, that's what it sounds like.
What you did, how is something, I don't know, that's just my opinion, something that you did 15 years ago, unless it's the same thing, how is that going to help with what I'm trying? It just all depends on what you're applying for too. Administrative job, tech jobs, marketing, they're all different. And so you have to research, what is relevant to the company that you're applying for. And so that's where that whole, if you don't do your research and you don't know what you're looking for, then yes, you're going to get confused as to what to list on your resume. And I'm looking at it from a G&A, administrative, technical, like I don't care that 15 years ago, you used, an outdated technology that doesn't help me to what I'm using now. If you were doing Microsoft Word, 15 years ago, but now I'm using G Suite, that doesn't really help me. So it just really just depends on the position that you're applying for.
Suzie, are you always searching by job title? Like they definitely need to have a very definitive job title they're going after, even if they feel like, oh, I want to do this, that, and the other. But as a recruiter, you're like, I need to fill this specific job rec.
I'm not always looking at the title because titles are different at every company. I'm looking at what you've done and what you've accomplished. What you've used, if it's technology, if it's what's listed on the requirement of my job. That's why it's important. What you have to customize your resume to the job that you are applying for. Because if they called it one thing at one, and it's okay to change. And that's another thing. It's okay if you were, for example, what's one that I come across a lot. Just because you were called one thing, a systems engineer, but you were really a software developer, it's okay to change your title to software developer to fit the job description is what I'm trying to say.
I think my other thing is that if you're using ATS systems and the job says marketer, but somebody puts marketing, they won't get passed to be seen by you necessarily, unless the ATS systems have greatly improved over the years.
They've gotten a lot better.
Good.
Yes.
I think you're giving everybody hope here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, they've gotten better. It used to be where, we don't, we want to tighten it because we only have an X amount of time and we only want to see a few resumes, but we realize that we may be missing out on some talent because of that such strict regimen. So.
How did you deal, Suzie, with not finishing college? I'm in the same position, but I've been a professional for a long period of time and learned all those soft skills and taught myself. And took continuing ed. So how did you deal with that?
Networking, that's still going to be the key. You find somebody that works where you want to work or is in the industry to make that introduction. And then if you've taught yourself and learned yourself, you're going to be able to demonstrate that during the interview process. So I never addressed it. Don't address your negative things, address all the positive things. I did have one person ask me, what happened with college? Why didn't you finish? And it was because I didn't need to go to college. I was already getting the work experience and taking classes here and there, and I'm a self-learner. And because of that, these are the things that I've been able to accomplish and where I am now. So don't let not finishing college keep you from applying. Even though it says bachelor's degree required, you still apply because we're looking at the experience. It's not as needed as it was before. And I'm not discouraging not going to college, but what I'm saying is that if you have 5 to 6 years of experience and you don't have the degree, it's okay.
We had one of my most impressive job seekers ever was a guy who had been an HR director or senior manager or something like that. Terrific ideas and all kinds of achievements in what he did. And he didn't have any college. And so he was one, I told him to apply for everything and not worry about it. But if the applicant tracking system, that's one of the things that it looks for is a college degree. There are
it depends on
that you can do on a resume to get it through the ATS without lying. We discussed those, but since that's such a deal breaker for some companies, how do you get your resume into the hands of a human being where your story can sell itself?
Again, we're branding, we're marketing. This is not a traditional way of finding a job. I'm giving you a non-traditional. And so a lot of people will disagree with, the whole I don't want to get caught up on the resume ATS. That's always going to be there. There is no 100% way of getting past that. Every company does something different. What I'm talking about is marketing yourself on LinkedIn, connecting with people, getting your foot in the door, asking for a recommendation. Half of getting what you want is asking for it. Hey, can you make an introduction? Sometimes you'll, be able to, find that one person that will say, yeah, great, no problem. I don't mind, making an introduction. But before you ask for an introduction, you start commenting, you start building the relationship. And then that's how you're able to submit a resume that tells your story.